What do you think is the most important? The sonic relationship between the preamplifier and the power amplifier, or the relationship between the power amplifier and the speakers? And I definitely thought it was that one, but now I'm a little bit undecided because I'm wondering if all three might be so interlinked that each can massively affect the other. And, what do you think to that? And maybe your views might change a little come the end of the video. And this video is going to look like a review of the BAT or Balanced Audio Technology VK90 preamplifier that you can see on the top of the rack there behind me. And I'm going to speak about my experience with it, very similar to how I would any of my other reviews. But I'm not looking at this as a review because the organization of me having the VK90 here is just not the same, because it's actually here as a home loan or a home demo type of purposes, with me very loosely considering its purchase. Because at the start of this year, I decided I wanted to go bigger with my reference review system, because I knew I was going to start to review and had been reviewing some very large and very high performance speakers, and a big system is an essential tool, I think, for doing that job. And a big high-end system to me means a separate preamplifier and separate power amplifier, really a full separate system. And this started a few months ago with the Vinny Rossi Brahma, an extreme high-end preamplifier that I did review. But really, I wasn't ready for it, being honest. However, it did set a crazy high bar of expectation for me in some important regards. But it's so way out of my budget that it couldn't even be a consideration for my review system. The BAT or BAT VK90 I have had my eye on for a while because it has such an interesting design, and I couldn't resist the opportunity to bring one home to try it out. And full disclosure, this is a retail unit. As I say, it's here on home loan or home demo from Reference Audio, the HiFi and AV dealer that's based in Witham in Essex. And I use Reference Audio's facilities to review products sometimes, so I have a great relationship with them dating back a few years now. And I do think having a good relationship with a local dealer is so useful and important for situations like this, when you're looking to expand your hi-fi horizons in a way by trying and testing gear out at home, because that's really where it needs to be, right? You need to try these products out for yourself. So I always think it's worth putting in the effort and the time to have a great relationship with a local dealer. And I have dual goals here. Like I said, I'm looking to expand my experience with different preamplifiers, but also I am looking for the one that will be the best preamplifier for my reference review system, that I am looking to visually and sonically match up with my current best power amplifier, the Esoteric S03. And I think the BAT preamplifiers visually match up very well in their silver finish, with their also blue, old school in a way, but still cool in its own way, screen. And it did feel a little old school to me going into the menu and adjusting each letter to label the inputs I was using as rose and vinyl. But I really didn't mind that at all. It has some charm about it, and I suppose has some character as well in a very modern screen hi-fi world. And the VK90 is what I think you would call a true high-end preamplifier. It's large, it's heavy and expensive, of course, and it does just one job. It's just a preamplifier. So it's designed to be the best it can be at one thing. And I can't help but be impressed by the sheer amount of sculpted metal that makes up the chassis. There is clearly a lot of machine time going into the thick metal work with all of the vents and labels and more. Visually, I think it's quite an industrial looking preamplifier, maybe more manly macho than female delicate. Maybe that sounds very sexist, I don't mean it like that, but it's certainly got some character, and I like how it looks on the white solid steel racks. So there's no complaints for me really about the styling or the build quality. It's built like a tank. But really, it was the internals that got me excited to want to listen to it, because looking at the photos on the BAT's website, I don't think they do this preamp justice, and I hope my video does a better job at giving you some idea of the scale of everything, but really, you need to see all this in the flesh to fully appreciate it. It was the capacitor array that really grabbed my eye initially, because the caps looked a lot like they are from Juland, that I know are supposed to be pretty special capacitors, but these are actually BAT branded capacitors, and they are massive, and there is a lot of them being used here, and it's impossible to not be impressed by this, especially when you find out there is 2 capacitors in each of them, in what BAT call Super Pack, which I believe is a hybrid of a silver in oil capacitor used with a silver and gold in oil bypass capacitor. So 2 in each of those what look like individual capacitors. And that is pretty wild, even to my non-engineer brain. And you can see 2 toroidals, 1 for each channel, seemingly as far away from the circuitry as they can get them, plus an additional toroidal that I assume powers the logic and the screen. Then of course you cannot miss the 8 Sovtech 6H30 valves, 4 for each channel, which is already pretty wild in itself, but it's the application of them that is interesting in what BAT call the 6H30 Super Tube, where they work together to create a single gain stage with no global feedback. And BATs call this the unistage as it has no capacitors. Then for the output stage, each channel has an output transformer wound using Cardas's high-end cable, and it's magnetically shielded within MU metal. So that is another very standout thing about this preamp's design. And it's a fully balanced preamplifier, but given the company name Balanced Audio Technology, that one is probably a given. But you can certainly tell this from the rear, because the VK90 only has balanced inputs, which could be a problem for me for future-proofing myself to complete reviews. I'm really not sure, but it's definitely an important point of consideration. There is no doubt that this is a very impressive preamplifier with a lot that gets me excited about its design, with the exception of the price, which is just under £15,000. So that's a huge amount of money to spend on essentially a volume control, and there is already 2 digital volume controls in that system there behind me. So I think in order for someone to spend this much money on a input switcher and volume control, it has to add something pretty special to the sonic picture. But also very importantly for me, it has to pair well with my Esoteric power amplifier. And I have had the Esoteric S03 here since the beginning of the year. And I've been able to tell that it's an excellent power amplifier for sounding clean, clear, very fast, very open. It creates a great sense of space in a soundstage. And I think it's very transparent. And it has a crazy amount of bass control. But at the same time, it's not looking to add character to the music. I think it's just looking to be clean power, muscle and control. But so far, I have found that the Esoteric seem to work better with some speakers more than others, and that is how hi-fi can seem to be at times. And I hadn't up until this point found a real love for using the Esoteric paired with the Audio Solutions Figaro M2 speakers that are my current reference speakers. But I felt they should be great together, and I've been trying to work out why. And I've been thinking this must be related to the preamplifier, because the preamplifier has to drive the power amplifier to get the best out of it. And I have spent my time listening to the VK90 with 3 different speakers, the Mission 770, the Revival Audio Sprint 4 and the Figaro M2. And that has been very useful for me to getting to know how it might affect the sound of different speakers with the same sonic relationship between it and the Esoteric power amplifier. And the VK90 is a very standout preamplifier for delivering music with a lot of energy. It's very dynamic, it's very vibrant, energetic, lively sounding preamplifier. You press play and music, you know, it's a cliche, but music really does come to life because it has such an energetic nature about it. So it's a fantastic preamplifier for listening to live recorded music, because that's where you really want that energy and to come through. And that makes it great for rock music, makes it great for reggae and electronic music, and I think pretty much everything I've played through it so far. But it's also a wonderful preamplifier for listening to more sultry music, like Ray Chen's Player One album, where there is a real emotional underlying impact to some of the tracks, where the emotion of it builds up in you throughout the track. And you don't even realize it's happening because you're so entranced by the beautiful instrument playing. Yet you can flip the script totally to something really soulful, energetic, like Honest Woman by Fornetta Davis. And the big soulful blues of this album, it's like listening to a live band in your room. It has that same kind of raw, unfiltered energy and presence and vibrancy about it without any stridency. And that is where this preamp is a cut above what I'm used to. For a good while, I was convinced that the VK90 was looking to be this ultra clean, clear, you know, transparent, see-through, you know, like not too much character of its own type of valve preamplifier. And I think that is true to some extent, but not fully true, because once you've let it warm up, I mean, like fully warm up, like put the preamplifier on the night before, give it all night to warm up, it takes that long, then the density of the music, like the fullness, the density, I can only use the word fullness, like the density of the music goes up into what I'm going to call like into the wow territory. And I think you can only get that, well, not necessarily true, but I think you get that kind of sound from valves. I think that is one of their standout strengths. But what you don't get is any of the valve kind of bloominess or thickening of the sound. It's still very fast, very clear, very dynamic and energetic, and very kind of see-through, but it's music's just so dense with harmonics and richness, and it's fantastic. It's damn fantastic. And what was so interesting to me is that this had really been missing for me when I was using the Esoteric and the Figaro speakers paired together. Everything was always just a little bit too clean, clear, and becoming too analytical for me. But now with the VK90, I've been getting a fantastic quality of tone and timbre to music, but it's also the fullness and the bass power and presence that I really like and really want in a music presentation that I know the speakers could do, and I know that the amplifier could do, but I wasn't getting them paired together. And I now know it's just related to the preamplifier. I named the Figaro speakers as my best speakers of 2024 for a reason. They can take you deep into the music and really elevate the listening experience to something that is more special. And I had the Griffin Diablo 333 here when I reviewed them last year. And that is an amazing integrated amplifier that brings so much out of a pair of speakers. And I have been very conscious of that fact. And that is what has really pushed me to look to level up my reference review system, to make sure I have access to this kind of quality of setup to be able to review other high-level gear properly. But to break down and simplify the sound quality of the VK90, starting with the bass, it's bass right up my street. It's big, it's powerful, really big and powerful, and tight as a drum actually with the Esoteric, real tight vice-like control over the speakers. It's brilliant because it has that wonderful combination of being massive in scale, big and dynamic, but really impactful when the music calls for it as well. And listening to the Squid Game soundtrack. Now, this is not an album that you might think it, but it has some very dynamic attacking drums in some of its songs. And this album is a real experience to listen to, especially through the VK90, because it gave this music so much vibrant character. And actually that album, like I said, you might not think it, but it has a lot of really nicely recorded samples, and even very basic ones, like a bit of wood, tapping on a bit of wood. Even that through this preamplifier, right? It's just that little bit extra special, and it's not because of the clarity, it's not because of the tone or timbre of that sample. It's like the combination of it, the way it's has that little bit of extra vibrancy, that little bit of extra special character that just elevates that little listening experience of something so simple, to something a little bit more special and a little bit more magical. And I appreciate that's so audiophile review cliche terminology, but it's the appropriate words to use. And if you think through all the music that you listen to, you'll hear, or I was hearing, just lots of little special, extra special moments happening throughout it. And all that does is it puts a smile on your face, obviously, but it just makes you want to listen to not only more music, but I think different music. It encourages you to explore new albums and go looking for new listening experiences. And that doesn't happen to me these days that often. So it's been a hell of an experience. And I found the treble to be interesting too, because it's very unfiltered in a way. So when it's good in the music, it's really good. But when it's rough in the music, you still hear it as that. It's not softened or diluted or filtered, but there is still always that little bit of extra special character about how that sounds. That little bit of extra energy and vibrancy. So maybe it's still a rough part of the music that you're listening to, but it's special rough. You don't mind it quite so much. And for the vocals and the mid-range, really, you've kind of guessed it by now. It's just all along those lines. You get a nice clarity, but a lovely sense of tone and authenticity to how vocals sound. But it's really the energy, the vibrancy, the way they come through with that little bit of extra live type of performance. And I don't say that if you've watched a lot of reviews of mine, I'd say that. I don't remember saying that very often. It takes a special bit of gear for you to sit there and go, wow, that vocal sounds more like raw, energetic live. But like I said, it's not raw in a bad way. There's nothing negative about it. It's just got this extra presence of, again, it's a bit more special. It just uplifts the listening experience, even to the music that you're very familiar with. Just that bit more. Comparing this to some of the much more affordable integrated amplifiers I have here, so I'm not aiming any criticisms at them, this setup does put you more in the middle of a three-dimensional music listening experience with a greater sense of depth, the way you feel more in a bubble of music with that extra vibrancy and energy. So you do feel more deeply immersed in the music, which I know is a cliche, but immersed is the appropriate word to use here. But in reality, the integrated amplifiers I have here, the much more affordable ones, of course, they still give you a lot of this. And I'm not using this comparison to try and shit on any of the integrated amplifiers. Far from it. They are still great. They can give you a lot of this. The only reason I've mentioned this comparison is because this is the proof that I was really looking for, that, putting some time into this and, spending the extra cost, having the extra boxes to have all these dedicated separate products is still worth doing in 2025. It can still give you some elevated, some different, some new, some enhanced listening experiences. And I've only tried 2 so far, and it's kind of the proof that I've been looking for, because at the beginning of the year, I reached out to manufacturers and asked them to tell me why somebody should have a dedicated preamplifier and power amplifiers. And they all said the same thing. With a dedicated preamplifier, they can do more with its design. So far, the 2 I've tested is the proof that I was looking for. And, it's the motivation to want to explore this more. But maybe the very energetic, lively, upbeat sound character of the VK90 might not be what everybody wants. Maybe if you're more of a listen to music all day in the background type of audiophile, I don't think really that's what this is for. This is about making music like an experience, a lively, upbeat, energetic experience. I class that as more of an active listen, right? Sit in the seat, pay attention, and get some, magical moments. But so maybe a different preamplifier would suit other audiophiles better. I don't know at this stage, but I can assume they might do. And the VK90 is definitely not perfect. It has some quirks about it. Firstly, it runs hot, very hot actually, I would say amplifier hot. If you have no music playing and you turn the volume to 0 and then you raise the volume, it makes a twang. And you can hear that twang sound come through the speakers, which means I assume it's coming through the valves. That's a really unusual thing. And I think as much as BAT have reduced kind of like valve grunge, that you can get a little bit of that valve grunge, there's still a tiny bit there. If you put your ear up to the speaker, you can hear it. So maybe there's a tiny bit of valve grunge to the sound of the VK90, but that's possibly also where some of that special character is coming from. So maybe that would be different to a high-end solid state preamplifier. And also the very lowest volume of 1 wasn't actually that low in terms of volume. So none of these would be deal breakers for me, but maybe there are things to consider for everyday usage. But one thing I do like about the VK90 is it has a standby mode that keeps the preamp on and warm, but still turns it off. And I found that to be really useful because it sounds so much better once it's warmed up over a long period of time. So if you're having a weekend of listening sessions, leave it on standby and then you're good to go much quicker. So right at the very end of this home loan period, I've just started to get such a killer, enjoyable sound from the VK90. And of course, it has to go back. I'm actually taking it back tomorrow. And I think that is the sign of what you should be looking for in a home loan, home demo situation. How do you feel about that product when you give it back? How much are you going to miss it? And how much can you not bear the fault of it not being in your system? That to me are the things, those are the emotional things I'm looking for when I'm home demoing a product and considering purchasing. Because if anybody's considering purchasing a HiFi product at this price level, it's a massive decision. It's a massive financial investment. And I think it's a massive commitment to that preamplifier, to that sound. Probably, it could be an end game, one you can have for 10, 20, maybe 30 years. That's a big investment, right? Not only the financial one, it's the commitment to that type of sound. So you really have to not just like it, you have to love it. And I think that's where the brain needs to kick in, and you should listen to alternatives around the price, lower in price, higher in price, so before you make a final decision. And of course, my situation is a little different to normal because of reviewing and how this needs to be a review tool. And I need to listen to some others, definitely, to broaden my experience. But look, if Bat wanted to send me one to use as part of the system, I wouldn't say no. Hint, hint, I definitely wouldn't say no. So hopefully this video has been interesting. Hopefully it's something here. This is a wild preamplifier. It's outstandingly good. I hope it's been interesting. Appreciate it's very high level in terms of price. But, if you can shop at this level, hopefully this video has been useful. And if you enjoyed it, hit the thumbs up and subscribe because I'm working on more.